Hello everybody, my name is Kai-Frederik Zastro. I work for the PSA Group and I'm currently the chairman of the OICA Technical Committee. OICA is the International Organization of Motor Vehicle Manufacturers. That means worldwide nearly all big manufacturers are member. And I'm very happy to present today the international regulation on automotive cybersecurity. So this is, when I say international, this means really global, worldwide, and this is under the responsibility of the United Nations. My presentation has 4 parts. We will start with the objectives of this new regulation. Then I will present the requirements, then the application dates, and finally the next steps. So what about the objectives? Why we need such a regulation? Why cybersecurity regulation? There is a risk of cyber attacks, this is certain. The first risk is a security impact, that a hacker may get your private data or manipulate existing vehicle software. That means the hacker could change software on a vehicle or get your private address, your phone book, anything which is on your vehicle. This is a security impact. There's also a safety impact. That means a hacker may use the vehicle as a weapon for criminal actions. Fortunately, there have not been yet terrorist attacks with hacked vehicles, but this is not impossible. That means a hacker could manipulate the braking system or the steering system and then steer the vehicle in a group of people. So this would be very fatal and dangerous. So it's a real safety impact, not only security. And last but not least, there's an economic impact. That means cybersecurity is a big business. There's a big worldwide cybersecurity business, automotive cybersecurity business, and also risk for the vehicle manufacturer. You have seen as just one example, the Jeep Cherokee, which had been hacked some years ago. So Jeep had to recall 1.4 million vehicles and also pay for the class action. So it can be very expensive for the society if there are cyber attacks. So very clear, the objective of the regulation is to protect the vehicle from cyber attacks. And you may be astonished that today there is currently no regulation on automotive cybersecurity in force. This is a domain which is not regulated at all today in no country. There's another regulation which I just will introduce briefly without going more in detail. This is the regulation on software update. So why do we need a regulation on software update? There's a necessity to update our vehicles because more and more vehicles get connected, and as a computer or a smartphone you need to update the software during the whole vehicle lifetime. So this has dramatically changed. If you bought a vehicle 5 or 10 years ago, you could drive it for 30 years without any software update. If you buy now a new vehicle, it is connected and it is necessary to update regularly the software to keep the vehicle up to date for safety reasons, security reasons, or also for service reasons. There are some manufacturers who update already the software, including over the air, and add new functions that may need homologation. For instance, new ADAS functions which have normally an impact on the vehicle type approval. So this is also a kind of gray zone today, that you can take an already registered vehicle and add new functions that had not been type approved on this vehicle. So there's a need to clarify also this gray zone. How can I, in a legal way, update a vehicle which is already registered with new software, which may add new functions which have a homologation impact? So the objective of this software update regulation is to ensure that the software on a vehicle is and stays compliant with the vehicle homologation. If we look on those kind of regulations, we have The United Nations with the W29, the Working Party 29, which is the World Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations, which has recently adopted two regulations, UN Regulation 155 on cybersecurity and UN Regulation 156 on software updates. There are also international standardization activities within ISO. So there's an ISO working group on cybersecurity, which has developed the ISO SAE 21434 on cybersecurity engineering. And there's another working group in ISO developing an ISO 24089 on software update engineering. Both standards are not yet published, but they are an important basis which go more in detail than the regulations. Of course, there are national standards today. You can see some examples. The European Union has some regulations which are not automotive specific today. In China, there are some laws, cybersecurity encryption law. There are some standards on information security which are not automotive specific. And for the automotive field, there's the subcommittee 34 with a working group on cybersecurity, which is currently developing Chinese automotive standards on cybersecurity. In the United States, there's no regulation on cybersecurity, but guidelines from the authorities. So to summarize the worldwide situation, the UN regulations are the first regulations worldwide on automotive cybersecurity and software update. They have been adopted in June of this year. They will enter into force next year. They can be considered as worldwide consensus because the GRVA, this is the UN Working Group for Connected and Automated Vehicles, is chaired by Germany, Japan, and China. And the task force who drafted those standards is chaired by UK, Japan, and the United States of America, though it's really international consensus, those two standards or regulations, UN regulations. Now the question is, what is regulated in the UN regulation? And here you can see just an example of the risks of unsecured access to a vehicle. So you have the vehicle with different ECUs, different internal vehicle networks, CAN, Ethernet, whatever. And you have interfaces. You have infotainment interfaces to Bluetooth, USB stick maybe. You have electric vehicle connections with smart charging, which communicate with the vehicle. You have the OBD port. It's very dangerous. You can easily access the vehicle and manipulate things. You have other communication, for instance, vehicle to vehicle directly, or also communication with wireless LAN, 3G, 4G, 5G. So these are the different connections to the vehicle. And cybersecurity is not just one component. Cybersecurity does not mean I have one component, one gateway which is secure. So it cannot be covered by the certification of some specific component. Cybersecurity is a capacity of the whole vehicle architecture. And for this reason, the scope of the regulation is the vehicle architecture, and there is no requirement for a specific solution. Regulation does not say you need this gateway, you need this security gateway or this software module. The regulation requires that your vehicle is protected and any interface, any external connection is included in the scope of the regulation. So that's very important. The regulation does not mandate any specific architecture. It's completely technology neutral. And this is very important to ensure further innovations, not to stop new technologies. Now I continue with the requirements. So the UN Regulation 155 on cybersecurity has two parts. There's one on the cybersecurity management system and one on the vehicle itself. The requirements on cybersecurity management systems are with regard to the organizational structure and the processes inside the vehicle manufacturer, how the vehicle manufacturer is organized in order to detect, monitor, and treat cyber attacks. And this cybersecurity management system must be active during the design phase of the vehicle, during the production phase, but even in the post-production phase. That means if the production is definitely finished, but the vehicle, of course, can still be used on the road. Then there are requirements for the vehicle type. For the vehicle type, a vehicle type means one specific electrical architecture, and this requires a risk assessment and implementation of mitigations. So this is, in a nutshell, the summary of the structure of the regulation. We will now go more in detail for the two parts. The first part is in chapter 7.2 of the regulations. So with regard to cybersecurity management system, the vehicle manufacturer has to document his cybersecurity management system. The authority or technical service will question and audit this and deliver, if they consider it is compliant, a certificate of compliance of CSMS. So one requirement is that this cybersecurity management system must consider all the phases: development phase, production phase, and post-production phase. It means even if the production is definitely stopped, the vehicle manufacturer needs still to monitor the cybersecurity. Then there are some requirements with regard to processes. We have the vehicle manufacturer needs to have processes to manage cybersecurity, to identify risks, and this is also mentioned in Annex 5 Part A of the regulation text. Assessment, categorization of risks, to manage the risks, testing security, so to monitor and detect to cyber attacks, and provide also data which supports the analysis of successful or attempted attacks. Then there are requirements with regard to mitigation, that mitigation shall happen in a reasonable time frame. And what is reasonable? That depends completely on the case. If it is, let's say, a safety risk with a high probability, the reasonable time frame can be very, very short. Maybe it's necessary to react in 1 or 2 days. If there is no safety impact, if there is no type approval impact, it could be okay to wait for some months. So it depends really on the kind of risk. The vehicle manufacturer shall monitor in a continuous way the vehicles on the field. This is very important. And the vehicle manufacturer has also to show how he manages the dependencies with the suppliers, because in the vehicles there are ECUs and software which are normally developed by suppliers, so there need to be a communication between the vehicle manufacturer and the suppliers to manage cybersecurity. This is the requirements for cybersecurity management system. For the vehicle type approval, those requirements are in chapter 7.3 of the regulation. The vehicle manufacturer has to show and document the compliance to the requirements of his vehicle type. And again, a vehicle type is an electronic vehicle architecture. And then the authority or technical service will raise questions and audit. And if they are convinced that everything is compliant, they will deliver the vehicle type approval certificate. So more in detail. First requirement is that the vehicle manufacturer has a certificate of compliance for the cybersecurity management system. This is very important. The vehicle manufacturer has to identify and manage for the vehicle supplier related risks. So if the supplier has maybe also some safety risks in his components, this must be covered by the vehicle manufacturer. The vehicle manufacturer shall demonstrate that he did an exhaustive risk assessment, and we will see more examples in the Annex 5 Part A of the regulation. And the vehicle manufacturer shall demonstrate that he has applied proportionate mitigations, and this is detailed in Annex 5 Part B and C. The vehicle manufacturer shall detect measures to monitor cyber attacks and to provide data forensic for attempted or successful attacks. And there are requirements for the monitoring. The vehicle manufacturer needs to monitor at least once a year the outcome of the monitoring activities, or even more frequently if there are attacks. And the authority shall require to remedy and to detect ineffectivenesses, and the authority can at any moment withdraw the certificate of the cybersecurity management system. That means the vehicle manufacturer can then not anymore type approve new vehicles. Now, as I announced, just a zoom on the Annex 5 of regulation. In the Part A, there's a list of threats, and of course this list is not exhaustive, but it's a kind of baseline, so you can see the type of threat and some examples. So it's a long list. This is just some examples, and you have to do in your risk assessment an exhaustive analysis of all those risks. Risks means what is the probability that this will arrive, means what would be, for instance, the motivation of a hacker to attack a vehicle like this, and what is the damage which could be caused. And the two, that means probability and the damage, that makes the risk. In Annex 5 we have also the Part B, which defines possible mitigations which are on the vehicle, so you can see the risk or the threat, and for each threat there are examples for mitigations, what the vehicle shall do. And Part B are the onboard mitigations, and there are also off-board mitigations outside the vehicle which are required in Part C. So for the type approval, the vehicle manufacturer has to show for all the risks which are possible the different mitigations he has applied. Just very shortly, without going in detail, for the Regulation 156 on software updates, to show the structure, there we have three parts. In the first part, we have the software update management system. This is similar to the cybersecurity update, so the cybersecurity management system. So we have to, the vehicle manufacturer has to show his organization, his structure, his processes in order to manage software updates and to identify software, how software is developed, how the impact on the type approval is traced. This is a management system, an organization. In the second part, there are requirements for the safe execution of the software updates and the user information. And then there's also a part on software identification. That means how to identify the link between software versions on a vehicle and the specific vehicle type approval. So there are three parts in the software update regulation. Now I come to the application dates of those regulations. As I have already mentioned, they have been adopted by the United Nations Working Party 29 in June of this year. So they will enter into force in January next year. That means, what does it mean? That means the legal act is available for application in the UN member states. So each UN member state can then choose to make them mandatory or not in its territory. So some countries have already prepared legal acts to make those UN regulations mandatory. The first country is Japan, who will make both regulations 155 and 156 mandatory. They will already be mandatory in 2020 for automated vehicles with SAE level 3 or higher. That means autonomous driving. And then there are introduction dates, July 2022 for new whole vehicle types and 2 years later for new registrations. If you need both regulations, if the vehicle can have software updates affecting type approval and is capable to have over-the-air updates. And then 2 years later, that means 2024 for new whole vehicle types and 2026 for new registrations. Both regulations will be mandatory even if you don't have over-the-air capability, but only software update affecting type approval. And for all vehicles, it will be mandatory to have at least the cybersecurity type approval. That means Regulation 155. This is Japan. Another region which will apply the regulations is the European Union with the 27 member states. And for the cybersecurity regulation, it will become mandatory via the General Safety Regulation, starting from 2022 for new whole vehicle types and 2 years later for new registrations. The software update regulation currently is not yet clear how it will become implemented in European Union. This is still under discussion. And then there are other countries. There's, for instance, Korea, who has also already published a draft regulation for vehicle cybersecurity, and other countries who have, let's say, orally announced that they may also implement those UN regulations. I have put here on the screen the links to the different texts. You can download the text directly from United Nations website. So there's a UN regulation on cybersecurity. There's an interpretation document which explains how to use the regulation. It's very useful for vehicle manufacturers and also authorities. The same for the software update regulation. For the regulation 157, automatic lane keeping systems, which is the first regulation for autonomous driving, and it requires compliance to regulation 155 and 156. And there's also another important link to the General Resolution RE3, which includes the integration of a Regulation X software identification number. This is in link with the software update regulation. So these are the links to the texts. Now come to the last point, which are the next steps. So of course, next steps are opportunities for global harmonization, because the society and the vehicle manufacturers, and I would say all automotive industry, it's easier if you have harmonized requirements. If each country will make different requirements, it makes the vehicle much more expensive, and this is not in the interest of the consumer. So it's in our interest of society to make the vehicles harmonized as much as possible. So what needs still to be done for harmonization? What are the next challenges for regulation? The first is you have the 1958 agreement of the United Nations. So with 54 signatory countries worldwide, just for information, neither China nor USA are signatory countries, but a lot of other countries are. So 54 countries are signatory, and they should, in our opinion, apply those new UN regulations and do not invent national requirements. This is the first point. So make sure that the 54 countries worldwide of the 1958 agreement will apply those regulations and not other specific requirements. The next point will be specifically for United States and Canada, because they have not a type approval system. So UN Task Force prepares currently a set of technical requirements that may be used for those countries which have no type approval system. So this is also to harmonize as much as possible the technical requirements, even if the country has a self-certification regime, for instance. And last but not least, there's China, who prepares currently some national standards on cybersecurity. And we believe it's very important that those standards get as much as possible harmonized with the work in ISO and the United Nations to have really international harmonized requirements, which are also used in China to ensure the same protection for the Chinese consumer as for the others. Okay, those are the challenges. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Goodbye.